Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AS13100 Deployment Virtual Supplier Forum presented by AESQ. Today, we have 300 plus individuals registered from 24 countries participating in this webinar. So welcome, everyone. We are recording today's webinar, and we will provide that video link to everyone that registered following the close of the event. And we will be taking questions today. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the supplier forum, but if you have questions, please enter them into the chat feature. And we do have participants remaining on mute throughout the presentation, so if you have questions, again, please use chat. So my name is Becky Lemon. I'm the Industry Program Manager at the SEITC, and I will be running today's presentation. We have a series of excellent speakers lined up for you today. And I would also like to introduce Jim Wilson, who's the Senior Manager for Supplier Quality and Development at Pratt & Whitney, Canada. Jim will be moderating our Q&A session later on today. AESQ supplier forums are typically held twice a year. When we were face-to-face, we were rotating them around to different geographic regions around the world, but they're a great opportunity to learn about updates of the work being done by AESQ, to share best practices, and to provide feedback to the AESQ. So we encourage your participation. Today's webinar is really focused around AS13100 deployment and everything that is supporting that deployment, including the standard and 13 reference manuals. Today's agenda is a packed agenda. We will be doing an AESQ overview, vision and objectives, presented by Barbara Negroe, Executive Sourcing Quality Leader at GE Aviation, followed by an AS13100 standard overview from Larry Bennett, Consulting Engineer, Global Sourcing Quality, Supply Chain Division, GE Aviation. Deployment Introduction and Milestones will be presented by Elizabeth Pace, Supplier Quality Strategy, Associate Director, Raytheon Technologies. And then we have presentations of 4 individual deployment plans, the first of which is IHI, which will be presented by Hiroshi Yamamoto, from the General Manager, Quality System Department at IHI. The MTU deployment plan will be presented by Michael Mrosuski, Quality Management Programs at MTU. Safran deployment plan will be presented by Katerina, Supplier Management System Coordinator at Safran Aircraft Engines, followed by Pratt & Whitney. Paul Morgan will present. Paul is the Senior Director of Quality and Processing Engineering at Pratt & Whitney. Then we'll have a deployment dashboard presentation presented by Elizabeth Pace from Raytheon Technologies, followed by a deployment survey results presentation from Jim Wilson, again from Pratt & Whitney, Canada, and Elizabeth Pace from Raytheon Technologies. At that point, we're going to take a 15-minute break in the presentation so everyone get a fresh cup of coffee. And then we'll proceed on with a focus on Apqp deployment presented by Carl Evans, the Apqp Technical Project Manager at Rolls-Royce. Then we have a risk-based audit system, internal and supplier, presented by Lisa Stolmer, Audit Management at MTU Aero Engines AG. We will have a presentation on AESQ, how to get involved. Jun Sakai, Chief Engineer, IHI Corporation, will speak to us about how to get more involved with AESQ. And then Jim Wilson, Pratt & Whitney, Canada, is going to moderate a Q&A session. So make sure you enter your questions in the chat box. And our summary and close will be presented by Barbara Negroe, Executive Sourcing Quality Leader at GE Aviation. So as you can see, we have a packed agenda, everyone. So we're going to move on here. Just a reminder, enter your questions in the chat function, or just make a comment if you wish. And we're going to start with a quick poll question here. I'm going to open the poll. If for some reason you can't enter your answer into the poll, feel free to type it into the chat feature. But we're just looking to find out, what city are you calling in from today? So go ahead and start entering your responses into the poll there. And I will share the poll in a few seconds. We'll just give everyone a few seconds to answer. It looks like we have quite a few people responding there. Just a few more seconds. And oh, everyone's still answering. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share those results with you.
In the chat as well, Becky.
Yep. Great. So we did have 91 of the attendees that responded to the poll. And I do see a lot of people entering their locations in the chat feature also. So you can tell by these results that we have people calling in from around the world. And we give credit to those that are calling in very late at night, wherever you are. So thank you for participating. So let's move on. I would like to introduce Barbara Negroe, Executive Sourcing Quality Leader from GE Aviation. Barbara is going to present the Aero Engine Supplier Quality Group overview. So welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Becky. Great to be here. I really appreciate, first of all, I want to start out with, I really appreciate everybody joining today. I'm the current chair of the AESQ, very privileged to be a part of this group and work with such amazing, passionate individuals from various member companies. We have a common vision goal, and I'm going to describe that a little bit in the next couple of slides. If we can go to the next slide, just to jump right into it, as you saw, we do have a packed agenda. Some of you may have heard this before, but because we always have new people joining the AESQ Virtual Supplier Forums or in-person supplier forums, I think it's good to always remind ourselves, why are we here? So what is the AESQ? How was it formed? What is our vision, purpose, and what are we ultimately trying to do to improve the propulsion supply base? So starting at the beginning, the aero engine manufacturer, so Aero Engine Manufacturing Group, was really developed out of a collaboration to address the burning platform back in 2013. That burning platform is not very different than what it is today. We continue to evolve. It consisted of the fact that airline passengers were set to double in size in the next 20 years. Our customers expect zero defects, and I think anyone who works with customers at any level can attest to that. Increasing level of supplier-made engine content. So whereas maybe in the past, a lot of the engine content was made within the OEMs, our supply base has grown and grown, and more is made at the suppliers. We have a global supplier footprint. There's a large number of common suppliers across the engine manufacturers and a wide range in terms of types and sizes of suppliers, different levels of headcount of resources available to them. And so it's important that we take into consideration everyone that we're working with. And our ultimate goal is improving quality, cost, and delivery, which remains a key challenge. Next slide. To pull this all together, we have a video that is available on our AESQ website. We wanted to show it here so that everyone can see how the defect prevention tools that we have been working on over the past few years really culminate and work together as a function, as a system, to be able to get to that zero defect culture. So let's see if we can get that play in.
Today, more than 3 billion passengers travel by air every year, and this is set to double over the next 20 years. These air passengers trust us with their lives. Naturally, our customers expect us to deliver defect-free products and services every single time. After all, that's our promise. But how do we guarantee zero defects when we know that inspection can never be 100% effective at sorting the good from the bad? The answer is to avoid producing defects in the first place. To this end, defect prevention activities are built into our advanced product quality planning and process control requirements as an end-to-end process, with each step being integral to defect-free production. Here's how it works. Firstly, we have product quality planning. This is where the design team works directly with the customer to understand what the product needs to do. From this, a product design can be created. Cross-functional teams then carry out design risk analysis to ensure that potential design risks are identified, understood, and mitigated. There are a number of ways this might be carried out. For example, by using a design failure mode and effects analysis tool. Next, the team designs and develops a capable manufacturing process to make the product. Any risk of this process bringing about non-conformance is evaluated using a process FMEA, and any such risks are mitigated to ensure that the manufacturing or assembly process will produce defect-free products. The appropriate levels of defect prevention controls are defined using the relevant information. For high-severity risks, we must strive for mistake proofing, while we can address other risks through statistical process control, inspection, or audit. All this is captured in the control plan. We then ensure the capability of the measurement and visual inspection methods required by the control plan. Once verified, we can start to measure the capability of the process to ensure it makes defect-free parts. The Delegated Product Release Verification Program provides a common standard for inspector competency and qualifications. Once in production, the role of manufacturing and assembly is not just to maintain the initial capability level, but to continually improve it to ensure customer and business targets are met. Moreover, data from our processes and inspection must be used to control the process by allowing us to take action before defects are made. If things do go wrong, our problem-solving process must identify and eliminate the root cause so that it cannot happen again. Furthermore, learning from the investigation needs to be fed back into the FMEA, enabling it to be captured and shared. The Aero Engine Supplier Quality Group standards have been created to provide clear requirements on how these defect prevention tools are to be effectively deployed. There is a clear expectation that each of us will deploy these requirements and cascade them down through our supply chain. The final stage of our defect prevention process is an effective audit of the quality system, manufacturing processes, products, and special processes. This review reinforces compliance and can identify further opportunities for improvement. Of course, to be effective, all these tools rely on good cross-functional working and leadership that creates an environment intolerant of non-conformance. After all, defect prevention is a key route to achieving our promise of defect-free products and services. AESQ, raising the standard for quality.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. That, to me, that is such an important video that really ties everything we do together. It's available for everyone to use internally to your businesses. Use it with your sub-tiers. You know, there are times where we are working on one, we can call it defect prevention tool at a time. We might be doing an 8D. We might be doing a PFMEA. We might be doing a different form of root cause corrective action, an MSA, et cetera. And it's really important to understand that they all work together as a system. Next page. Okay, so talking a little bit about our purpose. You know, as I mentioned before, the aero engine manufacturers created this collaboration group to address the burning platform back in 2013. Since then, it has really evolved. It was modeled after the automotive industry and QS 9000 originally. So the purpose of the AESQ is really to simplify and standardize the aero engine supplier quality requirements, create a common language for quality, build on existing industry standards where they exist. We are not looking to replace industry standards. We're looking to augment or enhance existing industry standards and then write them if they don't exist. Create requirements that are simple, prescriptive, and auditable, and promote the use of standardization and third-party training where possible. So the AESQ has done a great job of delivering results with pace. Because we are a kind of small, nimble organization, we're able to take action very quickly and really listen to the supply base and return the needed information to you all and to ourselves quickly. Next page. So who is made up, of the AESQ? There's 10 voting members. Like I said, kind of small and nimble, just 10 voting members. And it's really capped at that. So we have GE Aviation, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, Safran, MTU, Aero Engines, GKN Aerospace, Honeywell Aerospace, Howmet Aerospace, IHI, and PCC Structurals. And then we have been adding AESQ members that are eager to participate, non-voting, but extremely active in the writing committees and everything that we do. And so we're happy to have Cincinnati Thermal Spray, Consolidated Precision Products, CPP, Meggitt, and Solar Atmospheres. Next page. This is just the content of the voting members from each of those companies. So like I said, a passionate group of individuals who really care and want to make a difference in the propulsion supply base to do the things I mentioned: simplify standards, improve quality. Next. Our vision is to establish and maintain a common set of quality requirements that enable the global aero engine supply chain to be truly competitive through lean, capable processes and a culture of continuous improvement. Next page. So I think it's important to look back at where we started. If you go back to that 2012, 2013 timeframe, and even on into a couple years after that, you look at the situation from the seat of an aero engine supplier, you can see that there was a lot coming at them, and that is if they're a common supplier with multiple OEMs. So we not only have the regulatory requirements, various end customer requirements, and then industry requirements coming out of IAQG, NADCAP, et cetera. You also had the individual, and still do, have the individual requirements that enhance that from the OEMs. So you may be receiving the Sabre from Rolls-Royce or the S1000 from GE, et cetera, and then pulling all those together and working to create your quality system that makes you compliant to each and every one of those. After we took a look at that, the AESQ really said, how can we simplify this for the end, the supplier in this aero engine supply chain, and make it a lot simpler for them to be able to satisfy the requirements. So what we did was got together as a team, and we're going to talk about this. Obviously, that's the purpose of this deployment meeting. And really got together and scrubbed our specifications and commonized where we could, really came to the table and said, how can we form this into one specification? And we now have the 13,100. Next page. You can see that, from an evolution standpoint, we first created individual specs and from a commonization standpoint. So we started out with various specs like AS13004, so PFME and control plans, MSA, process control methods, inspection frequency plans with AS13002. And really each of those needed to happen as a journey to a single common specification for 13,100. If we hadn't done it that way and were able to take, incremental steps along the way, it would have been a lot more difficult to pull these into an overarching specification. So it's been a really nice journey over the years. Now these are all part of the 13,100. Next page. You know, we continue to collect best practices and work with different suppliers and even our own member companies and share them with the rest of the industry. So here are a couple from over the years. And today we're going to be talking about more, but more along the lines of deployment versus the individual usage of the specifications. So these are all available on our website. It's good to see these examples and best practices. And we're going to talk later about how you can get involved in various communities of practice where you can ask questions and share best practices on various individual tools and specifications. Next page. So continuing really into the meat of it and talking about the AS13100 overview, key highlights and what it is, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Bennett. He's our consulting engineer for global sourcing quality at GE Aviation.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, here, just privileged to be part of the team. Currently the leader of the AS13100 writing team. Picked that up from Dr. Riggs after he moved on to a different role within his organization. And we want to go over a little bit today about the standard itself. Next. So, you know, I always throw in a little bit of personal passion when I present this topic. So let me just kind of go back to, it was October of 2018, and Barbara Negroy, who is my people leader, approached me and said, hey, how would you like to be involved with a AESQ effort to standardize the quality system requirements across suppliers? Well, it only took about 2 seconds. That's how long it takes for the brain to give a response. Not only yes, but certainly yes. So if I go back in time, I came to GE in 2005. Prior to that, I was in the supplier world and facing the same kind of challenges that suppliers do today. Having multiple customers, each with their own independent and unique requirements, wondering why could we not get together as an industry and make these requirements common. So you know, as a supplier wanting this and asking for this, and as a GE member of the AESQ to be asked to be part of the team to standardize, it's just been a privilege. And so you can see here, we took that previous slide that Barbara was sharing, and then the future vision is to commonize the requirements into one standard for the aero engine business. Next. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we met in Rolls-Royce headquarters in London in 2018, and we had each of us bring our own command media. And so GE, Pratt, Rolls, and Safran were sitting in the meetings for about a week or so, rationalizing and trying to come to an agreement with some documents. We took the existing AS 13,000 series documents, which Barbara mentioned, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we took those and we turned them into a draft. That was, you know, over the next 2 years, pre-pandemic, we were meeting live on pretty much a quarterly basis and meeting on a weekly basis to work this draft. Turn that into, and now today we have a standard that's published. And we also still have some leftover requirements from each of the engine makers. We couldn't rationalize 100%, but we did reduce the overall number of requirements by more than 50%, which is a great start. And obviously we want to take that number and make it even more significant over the next writing cycle. And then on the bottom right, I'd be remiss not to mention the supporting guidance and best practice material. Just an absolute plethora of documentation on 13 different subjects, well written, and all guidance. You know, we say the standard is what the requirement is, and the supporting material and the reference manuals are the best practice to accomplish or how to meet the requirement. Next. It's important also to mention that the AS13100 document leaned on and adopted the existing AS9100 numbering scheme. We didn't create a new numbering scheme. We played right into the existing AS9100 structure. And you can see the example here of 9.3 management review. We added a unique 9.3.2.1, and all of those additional requirements are clearly labeled as supplemental requirements. Next. So I mentioned that there are still some leftover from the OEMs, and so those will all be rationalized and harmonized and hopefully pushed out very soon. I think that some of us, including GE, pushed this out early on, and I think everyone will have it pushed out to their suppliers here, I'm sure, very soon. But these are some of the things that the individual OEMs will have to articulate, is specifically maybe some of the specific IT interface requirements, potentially some record retention. There might be some things related to CPK or maybe even Apqp in terms of deliverables and rationalizing that across their supply base. Next. But this time, I think we're going to do a poll question that hopefully is going to help us understand what organization type from the AS13100 table best describes your organization. Are you a type 1 make to print, type 2A design manufacturer, type 2B design only, type 3 distributor, type 4 special process? And I think there's another one below that that I'm not seeing, that's type 5 raw material.
So Larry, the poll is open. It looks like we do have people responding, so we'll give people a few seconds to go ahead and enter their response to the poll. If you can't enter in directly into the poll, feel free to enter your answer into the chat box. So just a few more seconds there. It looks like we have about 53% of the people that have finished the poll. And there's another 15 seconds left on the poll. So we'll let that run out. And then we'll share the responses with everyone. So another 5 seconds, everyone. Got some good results here. And we're going to go ahead and share those results with you. So it looks like 48 people chose option 1, type A. Another 39 chose option B, type 2A. And there were 3 responses for option C, type 2B. 13 people said option D, type 3 distributor. 10 people chose type 4 special process, and 5 people chose type 5 raw material.
Okay. A little bit of cross representation across all the material types today. So thank you for that involvement. All right, we can go on to the next slide, please. So just highlighting some of the individual requirements of the standard, I want to first emphasize section 4.3.5, which requires a compliance assessment of the quality management system. So this is absolutely a vital step to take. And I'm sure that Elizabeth Pace, when she shares her deployment information today, is going to highlight this as well. But let me just say that this compliance assessment is absolutely key, so you know where you stand in terms of deploying and being at a state of readiness by the end of the year. RM 13009 gives you that detail, and we encourage everyone to do that right away. Next. Some other highlights. 8.3 has a set of common requirements for design and development. Those suppliers who have supplier responsible design. We include, the FMEA requirements, things about Apqp and PPAP, cross-functional teams, design for X, and using 9116 to manage design changes. Next. 8.4 has a wealth of information on supplier control. This would be your sub-tiers as a prime supplier to an OEM. If you are a prime supplier, 8.4 gives clear instruction and requirements for supplier evaluation, supplier selection, supplier control, and supplier performance monitoring. The industry, as well as the OEMs and the voting members, clearly understand the risk and the challenges associated with sub-tier control. We constantly get asked, how are you doing with your sub-tiers? And when we got sub-tiers that are 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 degrees of separation, it becomes very challenging for not just us, but for you as primes as well. And so if you're a sub-tier today, just understand that there are going to be additional things flowed down to you because we're trying to manage and standardize and consistently make sure that the sub-tiers are getting the information they need and that they're providing the documentation and the product back to the primes and onto the OEMs so that we can hopefully get our arms around and do a better job of managing the supply base. Reference Manual RN 13007 gives guidance for best practices on supplier management. Next. And you can see a whole list of benefits. Don't need to go through all these. Single standard, suppliers only have to buy one standard, supported by all the free issue reference manuals. Just again, a wealth of information there, all free material. Minimize the content of OEM requirements, common language, supported by global training, and allows the AESQ to focus on supply chain capability development. Next. And I'd be remiss not to, again, even though we've now been published for a little over a year with the standard, just a tremendous job by the writing team. And you can see the individuals listed here. A special shout out to Dr. Riggs, who has moved on from the AESQ effort, but his contribution has been just phenomenal. Appreciated his leadership style and his constant diligence to get this across the goal line. And to each of the writing team members, thank you as well. Next. And all of the experts that helped us to create the reference manuals across all of the organizations. You can see here listed 99 subject matter experts. Just a tremendous job, and thank you to each one. And again, just another shout out to these reference manuals. There's a link included here. They provide industry best practice and case study material on how to deploy. Some of these reference manuals are over 100 pages long. And just a lot. If I just highlight one, RN 13004, I believe it's got everything you need on how to do a PFMEA, how to do a reference PFMEA. It's just impossible to tell you how important the guidance material is. Yes, there's a lot of reading material, but it is invaluable in terms of applying and deploying this standard. Thank you for your attention today, and it's my privilege to introduce Elizabeth Pace, Associate Director, Supplier Quality with Raytheon Technologies.
Okay, thank you, Larry. You can jump to the next slide. I'm going to try and make up a little bit of time here. So, as you've heard from Larry and Barbara, AS13100 is a standard that was released as supplemental requirements for 9100 and 9145 and how they apply for aerospace engine manufacturers. It is our way of aligning on a common set of requirements, tools, and training. This standard was released March 1st of last year, but, and as Larry had mentioned, you know, some of the OEMs will be flowing this out or have already. The others will be doing so during the summer, but we are all aligned on a compliance date of December 31st of 2022. Our team, our deployment team, since its release, has been working on helpful tools, surveys to get feedback from our suppliers on how we can help. And you'll see some of that later on in the presentation, but also communities of practice and webinars so that we can connect the industry and really, you know, answer these questions together on how to better help. Again, compliance for our supply chain is set for the end of this year, and AS13100 leverages all the good work that the AESQ has released over the last few years. Next slide. So this year, the AESQ is focused on deployment and achieving the benefits of collaboration. As you'll see throughout this presentation, each of our companies are working on adding AS13100 to our own internal flowdown mechanisms, and we're going to highlight 4 different suppliers today. While doing that, we're also removing any duplicate requirements included within our own legacy flowdowns. You know, as you've heard, what will come out of ASQR01, SABRE, and others will be a reduction in those unique requirements. In addition, we have subject matter interest groups, which have been working tirelessly to release tools and best practices by topic. The thought is that by aligning on the requirements we see as the best practices and eliminating unique requirements, which just add burden, we will get better quality and be able to partner better with our supply chain. Next slide. All 10 of the AESQ member companies are committed to a compliance date of December 31st, 2022. I have received some feedback through the survey, and we're going to get into that a little more later, but it does seem like we're all moving at different speeds because the release of the flowdowns are coming at different milestones. But as you'll see later in this presentation, the deployment team has set these milestones for each company to achieve, but all the while allowing for some flexibility. Even though you may see the flowdowns updated on different dates, all of these companies listed here agree that the effective date will be December 31st. Next slide. Okay, what you see here is that high-level milestone preparation plan. As you can see, we're tracking through, and now, you know, the different companies are working on their QMS procedures and slowdowns, and also the training. Each member company is training quality professionals right now in order to be prepared. As Larry had said before, really just focusing, you know, what can you do? Just focus in on that gap analysis with the AS13009 tool and work with your member company to identify any gaps. So the next section for this forum is really going to dive into 4 different companies and how they're looking at their deployment. So I would like to introduce Hiroshi Yamamoto, who is the General Manager, Quality System Department of IHI. Thank you, Hiroshi.
I'm Hiroshi Yamamoto of IHI, Quality System General Manager Department. I'm speaking from Japan. Here in Japan, is now this week is a collection of national holiday, and yesterday was a Greenery Day, and today is a Children's Day. And here in Japan, 3rd vaccination for novel coronavirus is successfully processing, so the people is now come back to travel, both inbound and outbound. So it's very meaningful to introduce the AS9100 system to our company. Next, please. Okay, next 2 pages shows the brief introduction of our company, IHI Corporation. IHI Corporation is a long history. So the next year we will celebrate 170th anniversary, and we are one of the big heavy industries in Japan. So our products include the tunnel making machine, big bridge, nuclear plants, and top charger also. Next, please. This is the profile of the air engine, space, and defense business area. Employees number is showing now. The seat is 6,765, but about 8,000 employees, including the part-time job worker. And our annual sales has unfortunately dropped down in year 2020, but we look forward the in 2021 is a keen recovery. And also, our company, IHI, is a leading company of supplying the jet engines in Japan. Next, please. Okay, following page is showing our strategy of the how do we introduce the AS 13100 quality management systems. This page shows the our architecture, system architecture explanation chart. Left-hand side showing the previous architecture based on only the JS 9100 and ISO 9001. Right-hand side showing the IHI new current architecture. A big pyramid showing the IHI QMS. Of course, based on the AS 13100 and AS 9145 that characterize the AS 13100 as Apqp and PPAP. Of course, we're including the other quality management system requirement like AS 9110 for the MOU, and also the AS 9120 for the supplier, distributors, and Japanese unique quality management system requirement, ASJAC 968. This is enhancing the 9100 QMS, especially for the good cause and also the avoid of fallout or something. We are using this chart for our senior management and also the employees and also suppliers to explain how what is the AS 13100 quality management system is built. Next, please. This chart showing the our deployment and status. So far, we are now the milestone 4. We are aiming to completing remaining milestones by the end of this year. Next chart, please. This chart showing our positions. Green highlighted is April-May portion, and we are preparing the introducing the AS 13100 requirement analysis and the plan, and the kickoff in the December in 2021. And now we are studying several things inside and also our supply chains. And late May or the beginning of June, we will start the training of the auditors and doing the QMS internal extra audit. And anyway, our goal is December 2022 this year. And next slide, please. This is one of the sample of the gap analysis. Left-hand side showing the AS 13100 requirement, and the middle side is the primary gap analysis, and right-hand side showing the we verify the status. The result of AS 13100 gap analysis has been verified by each task team in order to revise or create internal procedures related to AS13100. Next, please. This is our task force teams. We are organizing the 13 separated task force teams. And each task force team is actively discussing internally how do we build, reform the QMS systems in IHI. And each process has been monitored monthly by committee teams. Next slide, please. This is, I think, end of the chart of my presentations. And anyway, we are now doing the fall down the requirement of the AS13100 for the supply chain. At first, we fall down cascade to the supply chain of our group company. Left-hand side showing, and a yellow circled part is a little bit little, but these are our subsidiary companies. And firstly, we introduced these requirements of AS13100 to our subsidiary company, and they are now doing the applicability table 1 and gap analysis, and we hold regular contacts and meetings with IHA team and IHA group companies. Later on, we will also fall down and cascade to the outside vendors too. And we will discuss regularly with our suppliers, supply chains. This is our deployment plan now status. Okay, our presentation is over, and it's my pleasure to give the tips to yours. So the next is Michael Wojciechowski of MTUs. Screen is yours.
Hello, everybody. So it's a pleasure for me to give you from MTU insight, a high-level insight, how we are deploying the AS13100. Next page, please. This, Becky. I'll skip the next one directly. So, in principle, here's the setup, how we are running the project. So we implemented a company-wide project, hosted primarily by a steering committee driven by quality, and below that we have a core team with a project lead is also held by quality, but we have a core team below that, which is covered with all the disciplines involved in implementing this status. As you can see, like an example, design, procurement. So everybody's on board, and we are extending the core team as needed if we are touching any subject, whether we need further disciplines. And the basis below that are all the experts within the MTU we need really to the subject matter expert to assess the requirements and do the assessment in terms of whether there are any gaps and what level of action might be needed. Becky, next page, please. High-level insight of our deployment plan in terms of the schedule. The little picture on the left top, I think you have seen within the presentation of list. That is the overall milestone plan, and out of that we directly started our assessment. So do you see the two branches with the MTU QMS assessment and the supply chain flow at the bottom? And after the release in March last year, we focused pretty much within the last year to define the project, set it up, identify the deltas and the need of action, and parallel to that, also reach out to our suppliers to pull them in, to flow down the information about, yes, the AS13001 is coming. Starting this year, we are mainly through of defining the need of action and really working on our gap closure plan and updating the specification as needed. Also, what we did basically beginning of this year, starting closer contact to our supply base throughout the technical supplier management at MTU to get the finger at the pulse. How are the supply base feeling with the implementation and where might be any support needed? And currently, we just in the phase to train our quality leaders to have the right level of qualification within the MTU. Target is that in the autumn of this year, we are at the stage to run a project review. That's something we plan around September, October timeframe to run a self-assessment to get evidence how far we got in terms of are we compliant right on time. And as we heard before, also MTU committed to be ready and compliant for beginning of next year. Becky, next page, please. How we did it, that's just a snapshot how we assessed that. So basically what we took, two elements. So one, the compliance self-assessment, what Larry mentioned earlier in the pitch, and our compliance matrix to the 9100. And we broke it down a little bit further in details. Basically what we did, we broke down the requirements of the standard in line items and addressed to every single line item responsible project key account, a member of the core team principal. Then the next level we defined is who's the responsible expert. And we did the initial assessment. Might we be already compliant right at the beginning of the start to the AES standard, or is there really action needed? And then finally, if you're going through the table on the right hand side, basically checking whether we are then compliant at the end of the project. And what does that mean in detail? That's an example of breaking down the chapter A. We broke it down in 413 individual requirements, and we are tracking really down paragraph by paragraph the number of requirements, and that's the way we are progressing through our project plan in terms of breaking down these number into actions and monitoring the status in terms of compliance. Next page, please, Becky. And that's the overall picture. So overall, in our world, the assessment covers 631 individual requirements over the 3 chapters. So chapter A with B and C, and chapter A and C, we are already there that we are pretty much compliant and all the actions are defined. Chapter B, there's still some work to do at MTU because we are coming from a Apqp deployment and we still have to cover some requirement definitions and potentially defining new processes for deploying Apqp throughout the process landscape of MTU. What are the next steps? I think that's pretty straightforward. Complete the action plan that we can run the assessment till the end of the year to be compliant. Qualifying the entire organization for the new standard, and really to work closely with our supply base to support the deployment throughout the entire supply chain. That is on a really high level, a summary about the deployment at MTU. And now I'm happy to hand over to Katrina from Safran. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Katrina from Safran Aircraft Engine. I will try to draw you the picture of where we are today at Safran Aircraft. Next page, please. So, as you know, Safran is a world leader in aerospace, and we have multiple businesses. Next, please. So, of course, we have the propulsion, so all the aircraft engines and equipment. Of course, a lot of equipment that you might know, like the landing gears, but also interiors of aircraft, defense, and space. So, this is the reason why you will understand that SAFE, so our requirement to supply chain, are not only for engine manufacturers, suppliers, but also to all of these activities suppliers. Next, please. So what is SAFE? So it's a One Safran project, as mentioned before. We have some main documents, so our procedures, a matrix of compliance, and a big manual, which is a provider handbook. SAFE is divided into activity sectors and activity type. So AS13100 today concerns only S1 supplier, which are the suppliers related to civil and military engines. Also, as the RM 13009, we have some activity type. So we are online with the build to spec provider, the build to print, the build to spec, of course, the distributor, and so on. And special processes and raw material are inside those categories. So this is the way we are managing today our requirement to our supply base. Next, please. So, of course, because AS13100 was issued in March 2021, we have decided to flow down this requirement, this AS13100, to only S1 supplier. S1 supplier are, of course, concerned by Safran aircraft engine suppliers, but also transmission system, aero booster, and some others. But today we will concentrate on Safran aircraft engine suppliers. We won't be able to modify SAFE before 2024 to prevent mixing messages because we have just issued a new release of SAFE. So we have an ongoing project at Safran Aircraft Engine since 2021. Next, please. Once again, these are the milestones we have been looking for. These are the same milestones presented by Liz and other presenters beforehand. 7 milestones. Next, please. This is where I crossed my finger. Last time, everything was mixed up, so very nice. Glad to see that. So milestone 1. So what have we been doing? At Safran Aircraft Engine, we have been doing ourselves the gap analysis. So review the RM 13009 internally. We have been preparing our answer as a supplier, reviewing, of course, the main difficulties, put an action plan in place, and, of course, starting the learning curves for those involved in that gap analysis. Of course, we have been working on our gap with SAFE. So identify on the two-way round, SAFE compared to RM 13009, what is more, and the other way around, RM 13009 compared to SAFE. At the moment, we are working on identifying, number 3, the gap with Safran aircraft engine specific supplemental requirements compared to RM 13009. Next, please. So, of course, with the gap with SAFE, we have identified some differences that we have, and we have prepared a small communication kit we are reviewing at the moment. We have the gaps in Chapter A, the gaps in Chapter B, which are very few at the moment. Apqp, we have very few gaps at the moment between SAFE and AS13000. 13,000. Sorry, and so we are working on that, and we are almost ready to share with our supply base. Next, please. So some example, some gaps with SAFE, of course. The on-job training with the customer requirement, internal requirement. We were asking something, but not that detailed. We are a bit different with the auditor competence requirements. Of course, the quality foundation training course is something new, but I think it's new for everyone. It was not in SAFE initially. We have in section 8, we have some additional requirements that were not exactly the same way in SAFE with supplier evaluation and selection control and performance monitoring. And of course, also a little example, the use of handheld spectrometry was not required either in SAFE. Next, please. But some of them are quite the same today, like we had started requiring human factors since I think it's 2015. Of course, AD problems were already in SAFE. Apqp PPAP are quite the same way, and FOD also are already included into SAFE. So these are some of the items that are quite close to what we are requiring today to our supply base. Next, please. So of course, today we are requiring to conduct a compliance assessment. Our compliance matrix, which was called GRF 0033, was working the same way for us. So for our supply base, it won't be very difficult because it's quite similar. And also, of course, we are working on a communication kit to that supply base in order to compare, as I mentioned before, the two matrices and detail what is more on one side and what is more on the other side. So we will be able to just ask you the difference if you have already signed one of the two documents. Next, please. So our milestone 2 was approved in June 2021. The communication plan internally is in process for main actors, and we are preparing a larger communication to communicate with all players in the whole company, and the objective is the third is after September, the third trimester. Of course, communication and training has been launched with main after, as mentioned before. Concerning milestone 4, communication plan to supply base, we haven't started yet. We talked about AS13100 before it was published, but not really since. We have a communication in preparation, and so we will start shortly. Our objective was in the second trimester, but I suppose in June we should be ready to start communicating with our suppliers. Next, please. The training plan, so internally it already started, but we need to extend it during summer. The training plan to supply base will start in September once they had time reviewing AS13001. And of course, Milestone 7, which is the flow down, will be done during summer 2022 with the communication I talked about before. Next, please. So this is our deployment plan at Safran Aircraft Engine. And I will hand to Paul Morgan from Pratt & Whitney, and he will explain his deployment. Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody who's located around the world. I am communicating to you in this WebEx from Hartford, Connecticut. Connecticut's obviously the home of Pratt & Whitney. Before I get into my presentation, I just want to just issue a special thank you to the steering team, the working group, who has been on a multi-year journey to drive this collaboration and integration and consolidation of requirements among multiple business entities. It's just fantastic. So my last three predecessors and their slide previews, it seems that we're all kind of doing the same things. We're going down the same path. In the next couple of minutes, I'll just highlight where we are at Pratt & Whitney and our deployment. Next slide, please. So for us, Pratt & Whitney through the years, has, issued requirements through our AESQ 01 series. And, there's been a transition, a journey through the last few years. And it's, involving, problem solving. It's involving delegated product release, inspection plans, measurement system analysis, and so forth. As we turned into 2019, we really started to turn a corner on PFMEA and control plans, really increasing our PPAP elements, focusing on process controls and so forth. But what's interesting, and as many of you know, there's often separate requirements in all of these different activities. And as we go into 2019 and through today, 2022, we're really driving an APQP integration and PPAP into a more centralized set of requirements, so we are all speaking the same language and so forth. Next slide, please. So it's interesting, and I saw a like chart on this on my predecessor's slides. We had to sit down at Pratt & Whitney and take a hard look at AS13100 and identify what are the gaps, and we utilized a standardized gap analysis profile. And I will say that the working team spent a lot of time together with AS13001 on the one side of the screen and ASQR on the other, and like, what are the opportunities, what are the gaps, and so forth, and how do we integrate in a more collaborative manner to drive alignment throughout the industry. A lot of effort, and I will openly admit, we at Pratt & Whitney executed some change management internally to align, and we did so in a collaborative manner. Next slide. So if you take a look, and again, the other OEMs have started or completed based upon their milestone plans for development. We're taking a look at our ASQR Rev 11, and we're removing any older or outdated references to AS13000 and other specifications, and we're aligning it to a singular AS13100. Now, Pratt & Whitney, like General Electric, like IHI, Safran, and so forth, there are specific elements that are critical to their individual quality management systems. And we're no different. And so when we flow out ASQR 01 Rev 12, there's going to be some remaining elements that are specific to Pratt & Whitney's quality management system. I will be very transparent, say that this is evolving as we progress down this journey. And ultimately, we are driving to a collaborative alignment across the industry. Next slide, please. So what's interesting, there's a greater movement at Pratt & Whitney in decreasing process or communication complexity and length. And one of the things I really highlight, like Earl Capozzi, Lisa Clavelo and team, is their focus on, driving our ASQR 01 specification. I mean, page reduction, 174 pages dropped to 102 pages. That is huge. And for suppliers who receive technical flow down from us, they understand how much paperwork comes at them. So this is an excellent opportunity at waste, but also focusing on, requirements, flow down, integrity, and being less complex in how we flow things down. We're reducing ambiguity and through our reduction of the use of shall in our requirements. And we're also really focusing on how our revision 12 is really aligning to AS 13100. We're adding human factors. We're adding sub-tier management. We're adding internal audit and auditor competencies. And we're focused also on design and development. Now, what's interesting about this is as the pandemic has, I would say, decreasing a bit, I have personally been visiting suppliers. And I'm starting to hear suppliers bring up, Paul, what are you doing for ASQR? What does the future look like? And how are you guys aligning to 13,100? And I'm getting excited because now suppliers are asking us as our part of the journey and how we're progressing forward. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, when I think of contract flow down, we're driving better quality and delivery by harmonizing and standardizing around one aero engine procedure. Again, I think this is all goodness. Next slide, please. And so, and I mentioned it already, but in a future state, AS9100, AS9145, and AS13100, the paragraph sections are both being integrated into both Pratt & Whitney, what we call America, and Pratt & Whitney Canada, and we're targeting, the release this quarter. The teams are actually pushing for it. And this is going to be key because what's interesting, so for us, the airframers, which we provide engine products to, and this is both from a military and a commercial application, they are looking at us, Pratt & Whitney. What are you doing to eliminate the risk? What are you doing to better harmonize across the industry, so forth? So what I think is important, that end user customers connecting with us and their requirements, and us connecting with our suppliers, we're harmonizing the entire value chain, from, let's say, raw material all the way through end user delivery. Pretty exciting. Next slide. Another element here is, well, how do we spread the word? How do we communicate? And so for Pratt & Whitney, those of you who are work with us, you're familiar with the Eagle Eyes. You are familiar with our supplier portal, and the material is hosted on both the Pratt & Whitney and the Pratt & Whitney Canada supplier portal. We are linking our FAQs on AS 13100 and ASQR. We're sending those out as well. But another element that is not as on this page is my team consists of 400 individuals that are globally deployed around the world. Most of these individuals are supplier facing. We're conducting internal training so the folks that you interface with at your locations are knowledgeable and can help you help guide you on your journey through not just ASQR 01, but through AS 13100 implementation in your organization. In the future, we see some ASQ-like videos being deployed on our supplier portals. We're actually challenging our digital technology team on how do we do that, and how do we continue to increase the communication beyond emails or other written forms like the Eagle Eyes and so forth. My final statement to everybody here on this WebEx is that all the organizations that are presented to you previously are aligned and focused on this initiative. We're linked together at a journey. We're joined by I would say, a command strategy by our steering team. And I really am starting to feel traction and movement into the global value chains that support ultimate customer delivery. So I wanted to keep it very short. I wanted to keep it on schedule for the call today. But if there's any questions or anything that comes up in the future, please reach out directly. And I thank you very much for the time.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. Okay, so you have seen a few of our member companies and how they're specifically working on deployment internally. A big thank you to Hiroshi Yamamoto, Michael Morosky, Catherine Katarina Grafka, and Paul Morgan for those focused presentations. As you can see, each of the 10 member companies are at different spots in their journey, but we are all committed to compliance on December 31st of 2022. I would encourage each of you as suppliers in the supply chain to use the same type of milestone plan in order to work through deployment at your own company. Make sure to complete the gap analysis, or AS13009, which you can find right on the webpage, ASAP, to understand and work with your customer on any gaps you may have and document any exception management. Next slide. Okay, so just, some quick highlights here, and just to recap what we've talked about so far. All of the member companies are working on flowdowns over the next few months. Compliance is aligned. All member companies are committed to that AS13100 standard compliance date of December 31st, 2022. Company-specific requirements and unique requirements will be reduced. AS13100 will be supported by free issue reference manual guides, linked in communities of practice, and webinars. And those are by topic. I have a few more slides on that as well. And then common training requirements are being provided by the third-party professionals and is available globally. Next slide. Okay, so as I have mentioned, each of those reference manual guides are being supported by these subject matter interest groups. And the way that they are going through this is also through a milestone plan. So in addition to the own company milestones, we've established these SMIG groups, which are in charge of the tools, reference manuals, feedback, communities of practice, and webinars, and they're split out by topic. Recently, we have offered webinars on FAI, 8D, human factors, and defect prevention, and you can still find all of those videos online on the AESQ webpage. We are in the planning phases for additional webinars we'll be rolling out over the next few months. Each of these groups meet regularly, are completing charters, and are active on LinkedIn and the communities of practice. So you can go right on LinkedIn and you can join these groups. There's a lot of conversation and questions and tools and tips and information about webinars that's passed through on LinkedIn. Next slide. So we have had 11 communities of practice that have been launched. There are 1,532 members that are participating in those as well. Later on today, June Sakai will also give you some more information on how to get involved. Next slide. And again, please go to our webpage in order to see the latest offerings for those webinars and events. And maybe we'll even get to start to talk about getting back together face-to-face by the end of this year for the next supplier forum. So that is what I had for this section. I know I'm going to turn it over to Becky. I know we're pausing for 15 minutes, give everybody some opportunity to get more coffee or take a bathroom break. Becky?
Thanks, Liz. So we have an automatic timer on the screen. You can watch it. It will count down automatically for our 15-minute break, but everyone please go get a cup of coffee and rejoin us in 15 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Next up is the AS13100 Deployment Survey results presented by Elizabeth Pace of Raytheon Technologies and Jim Wilson from Pratt & Whitney, Canada.
Okay, thanks, Becky. So as I had mentioned before, one of the tools that we've been using to really gauge where the suppliers are within the deployment process, we've been sending out these surveys. So our first one was sent in August of 2021, prior to the last supplier forum, and we really focused on, what is the supplier's general knowledge of AS13100 and the AESQ. We did receive 158 respondents. We got the feedback that they were familiar with the AESQ. We were really trying to create a baseline for deployment well before the deadline, and also, look at what type of webinars and all that stuff we would do.
I'm not seeing the slide you're talking to. Becky, are we?
Oh, Becky,
My
next slide.
screen is still showing our pretty pictures. There it is.
There we go. So we were really just trying to create a baseline for deployment well before the deadline. That way we could target some webinars. It also gave us some ideas for the communities of practice. And, we collected that feedback to drive action. So prior to this supplier forum, again, we sent out a survey in April 2022. We did receive over 482 respondents. So we did collect that last week. I believe there was a few more since then. But it was a more targeted survey to better understand, the Aero Engine Supply Base's implementation status. So we'd like to kind of walk you through some of the results that we saw, and then, just kind of talk about what our next steps are. So I'll turn to Jim. Next slide.
Not surprisingly, the responses to the survey were pretty much what we want. The first couple slides we have here are basically just on who responded. Now, remember, that was 482 respondents. That doesn't necessarily mean there were 482 suppliers represented, but of the respondents that responded, basically a picture of the supply base around the world, I think. Most of that was in North America, 70% of them. And over 50% of them were under 200 employees. So that's what we know. One of the benefits of the way that we did the survey this time is we were able to segregate suppliers and which AESQ members they are actually supplying to, so we can actually segregate this data right down. For example, this is total data, but we could segregate it by Pratt & Whitney suppliers. We could segregate it by GE suppliers. So that gives us a little bit more information. And some of the numbers do actually change when you start doing that. But basically, this is where the respondents came from. And, as we know in the Aero Engine supply base, most of our companies, over 50% there, are smaller companies, some as low as 5 and 10 employees kind of thing. So we do need to make sure that, we did try to make sure that AS13100 was flexible enough to deal with the multinational suppliers as well as the mom and pop shops, which are a very important part of our supply chain. Slide, Becky. Keep this quick. And again, as we said, we asked each respondent, hey, which of the AESQ members are you a supplier to? And this was the breakdown. So these are actual number of respondents. So the highest one was GE Aviation. The interesting point is that if you took an average of all of those that had one of these 10 as their customer, the average for each one of the respondents was 3.75 members. It's an interesting number because it almost matches identical. When we do the DPRV training, all of you are sending your DQRs for the various customers to the single AS13001 DPRV training offered by SAE. In that course, I also asked the DPRV candidates, which suppliers are you going to be a DPRV for? And the number is almost exactly 3.75. So it was nice that it aligned there. But, just so you know, and it's important to us to know that, well, yes, on average, each one of you has got not only Pratt & Whitney as a customer, but you also have GE, Safran, and 3/4 of Rolls-Royce. So, in implying the AS13100, we hope that that's going to help you a lot because your 3.75 customers are basically going to be asking the same thing of you going forward. Slide, please. Here, now, again, it's just, this is an interesting one because I specifically like to look at that top blue bar. We asked at the time in September of last year, and then we asked again this year, where are you in your implementation? We gave you 5 different categories to talk to about. So it's not much of a tale here, but you can see that the purple, which is basically the number of companies or number of respondents, remember I keep saying companies, but I mean respondents, that are actually have completed their self-assessment and are looking at their gaps as, you know, significantly large, that purple line. The total line of blue and red at the bottom of those that really haven't got started has dropped by a significant percentage there. Concerning is that that's still over 30% of you have basically not started the RM 13009 self-assessment. And every time AESQ has made a supplier presentation on timing, we've said that that assessment probably should have been done in September, October last year if you're going to meet the January 1st timeline this year. You are one of those companies that hasn't yet even begun anything, or you haven't even started the RM 13009 self-assessment. You are behind. You are absolutely behind. And your November, December is going to be crappy unless you get going very, very soon, is a message from this slide. Kind of funny to see the number of supplier or the percentage of respondents that thought they were compliant has dropped. I think probably because they started taking a look at the details of 13,100, figuring out that that was going. Okay, slide please, Liz.
Okay, so one of the questions that we really wanted to focus on too is where can we help? There's a few, you know, new topics here that would, you know, otherwise need a little bit more information. So these are kind of the areas where we've focused in, created those communities of practice. You know, we've had webinars on Apqp, AS9145, human factors, control plans. And, you know, you'll see now sub-tier management is something that's new from August of last year to now April in this chart. So that's something that we'll be pushing them to do in the next 2 months or so as far as webinars. You know, continue to kind of give us this feedback. Where can we help? Please make sure to go on and join the communities of practice. You know, ask those questions within those forums, and we'll continue to put out more information and tools. Next slide.
There have been subject matter webcasts that were recorded and are available on the AESQ website. For example, very extensive one that our friend Catherine did on human factors is there, and you can go ahead and see it, and you get all the information that was there. This is my slide? Yeah, this is my slide. Okay.
This one's yours.
Yeah, this is me. All right, what this is, folks, is it's a combination of two questions from the current survey. One of them is, where do you think you are in your AS13100 training plan? So you realize you have to do some training. There are at least the 2 courses that need to be done, plus some internal auditor training, possibly, et cetera, et cetera. So in responding to that, and we gave those different categories you see along the bottom of the graph, stacking that up against the previous question we talked about, which is where are you in your implementation? We see that, you know, training is definitely linked to the ability to continue to move on with your AS13009 self-assessment, and then get going on the action items you may find from that assessment kind of thing. So the message is get the training done as soon as possible. That will enable you to get to farther up the line when it comes to the implementation. I will throw that out there, and we throw that out there to everybody that we talk to. Specifically, the foundations course, the Quality Foundations course, is an instructor-led course. There are only a finite number of those courses. Go out there and get registered as soon as possible to make sure that you have a spot before the end of the year, or spots before the end of the year. But you can see that, you know, the companies that aren't working on their training are those that aren't working on AS13100 compliance. So it really is something that is very important to get done as soon as possible. And that's the message I think you'll hear from almost everybody today. Slide.
Okay, well, if there's any page that you kind of take away from today, this is it, right? We urge you, launch your company into a good position for compliance. You know, we've been talking about this probably for the last 8 months, and we'll continue to for the next 8 months. All of the companies that are member companies of the AESQ are committed to compliance for December 31st. So understand your position, right? AS13009 is right on the web page. You can complete your gap analysis, document your closure plan with your OEMs that you do business with. It's something where if you've already documented where you have gaps, then when you go through the initial auditing phase, you know, you are already covered. Get involved. Sign up for those webinars and communities of practice. go ahead on the webpage and watch the ones that were already pulled together. And then further your knowledge. Like Jim just said, you know, reach out for those training opportunities. They are filling up. They are available globally, and they're available virtually. So with that, I'm going to turn over now to Carl Evans, who's going to talk a little bit more about our #1 topic, an Apqp deployment. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much. So just as a little introduction to myself, I was one of the original writing members of AS9145, and also had the privilege of taking the lead on the AS13100 and the gold book and stuff. So if we could move on one slide, please. I'm going to talk about Apqp deployment, reflect a bit on how we've done things in Rolls-Royce, and then leave you with some thoughts of a set of enablers to help you think about how to get on the journey if you're not already, and also how to enable this better. But as a starting point, I just want to reflect on why Apqp and PPAP, specifically to our industry. Increased levels of product safety is an absolute necessity in our type of industry. And there's absolutely lots of data that shows correlation between high levels of quality performance actually is synonymous with increased product safety. And that's one of the objectives of Apqp and PPAP. It's to improve the quality performance, but also reduce the cost. Could you click on one, please? And there's 3 enablers I'll start with. There's many I could talk about, but I'm going to start with just 3 enablers which drive improved quality and cost reduction. The first one is having a common process up and down the supply chain. You know, there's a core message all the way through the presentations today is about the importance of what we're trying to do in driving standardization. The value in terms of Apqp is removing wasted effort. You know, so it's about synchronizing and doing the right things at the right time. So remove the wasted effort, and also miscommunications, just misunderstandings what's expected, what's meant by terms, etc. So one of the underpinning enablers is having one process up and down the supply chain. The other one is, you know, one of the core things about Apqp is its rate to get faster maturity in the product. And what I mean by that is going into production, starting to turn the handle of making parts. You know, traditional methods being some level of product realization activities, then we make parts, and then we sort of problem solve our way through it, and then need to revalidate and hit by quite large costly change management whilst we're in production and learn about it. And what it really does is accelerate that learning through feedback loops, but also really getting to the point of designing and developing the product and processes at an early stage through a constructive manner. And what it does is accelerate that product maturity. The other piece about it is the toolbox it presents is something for a cross-functional team, and really a key message, if anything, from today is Apqp is definitely a cross-functional team. It's a team sport, and what it facilitates is risk identification as early as possible and mitigating that. There's various proactive tools in the box: requirements capture, DFX, design for manufacturer, assembly, etc. FMEA, design FMEA, PFMEA. They're all structured, proven practices that really help the team mitigate, identify risks early and mitigate. Could you click on one more, please? And really what it also does is put a foundation in place around improved quality and cost. And the foundation is about ongoing change management. It puts a standard and practices in place that then when any engineering change needs to take place, you know, modifications to the design of the product, works transfers, change in the manufacturing methods, it gives you that solid foundation to springboard off. If you could click on one, please. So that's the starting point of why Apqp and PPAPs are really important for our industry. Where are we at as a company, Rolls-Royce? Well, ourselves as a business is fully committed. Rolls-Royce Civil Aerospace is fully committed to APQP, PPAP and cross-functional working. Now, the easiest way is to show you some evidence of that. What you see in these two images is on the right-hand side, November the 15th last year, we introduced a new quality management system. What you see on the image on the right-hand side is the portal, one of the portals into that quality management system. And its design and look is no coincidence to what you see on the left-hand side. If you've become familiar now with AS13100 and APQP PPAP, you would have recognised, you should recognise the image on the left-hand side, which is what's known as the timing chart. And what I'm drawing attention to is physically these look similar because we've structured our management system in this manner. That's how committed we are. And we implemented that last November. Our customers are absolutely committed to this. They're asking for it on a regular basis. And then in terms of our suppliers, what AS13100 does in terms of APQP and PPAP, in terms of the means to yourselves, is it significantly reduced customer specific requirements. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment. So that is our commitment around APQP as a business. Could you move on one, please? So I've talked about last year we've introduced a new quality management system and part of that embraces APQP and PPAP. The sort of journey we've gone through to get there is not overnight. It has been a journey. Prior to implementing the quality management system last year, last year and the year before, we were doing early trials around the framework and application just to ensure that we've got things right. But if I go right back in history, there's been a journey which has always been navigated in a way, knowingly or unknowingly, to APQP. Those suppliers who have known us for years will recognise terms like building quality. These have been drivers going back in time which has really got us to centre on building quality into our products and manufacturing processes. And more recently, zero defects, which gives a clear statement of what the objective is been also a driver towards that. In terms of our quality management processes, many years ago, like many other companies, we've introduced PPAP into our supply chain, our businesses, and then we had versions of APQP, one of which we've used, which is called IPPR. It's not an industry standard, it's a Rolls-Royce based framework. But what this has done is it helped us really learn about what's important in terms of implementing APQP in the business and the value of it. And I could give you a catalogue of other type of planning activities where originally the early days were heavily focused on the SPC, and then we built on that to understand what key product characteristics are, really get into FMEA and so on and so on. And all this stuff has been a catalogue of a journey towards APQP and PPAP as a clear requirement and quality management system attribute within our business. Could you click on one more? Absolutely, through this journey has been the adoption of industry standards. More and more we've been embracing what industry provides when it suits what works for our business. And what I mean by that, what works in our business environment. The AS13 series has been coming along over the years. We've been embracing those. If you could click one on more, please. So that's sort of an inward reflection. If I reflect externally to our external supply chain, the external supply chain, Sabre is our vehicle over the years to communicate what are requirements. In the early days, Sabre 1, when it first came out, there wasn't anything called APQP or PPAP. There were some things called MPI requirements, and they were loosely around what the APQP was about. And really, there was no industry standard for us to fall back on and utilise, which really drove us down a route of extensive Rolls-Royce specific requirements. Sabre 2 came along. We then modelled more of Sabre 2 on APQP and PPAP. But reflects on what other industries had as standards. So in other words, there still wasn't an industry standard for us to reflect, to utilise, but we reflected on what other industries are doing and started modelling more. That reduced the amount of specific requirements, but we still had lots of Rolls-Royce specific requirements. The era of Sabre 3 enabled us to call on AS9145, and again that then gave us this vehicle to reduce the amount of requirements we had. So we reduced them fewer. But there were still some gaps around 9145 and how we operate within the engine supply chain. And that's why AS13100 coming along has been really helpful as well. So we're at a point now through the release of Sabre 4 that any Rolls-Royce specific requirements are really minimal. So it's been quite a journey. If you could click on one more, please. So a little reflection to share with yourselves about what have we found as useful things as a reflection on how we've been driving implementation within our business of Apqp. So I'm using 3 pillars: leadership, cross-functional teams, and effective project management, planning and project management. And the reason I'm pointing to these is because they are really the pillars which support implementation of Apqp. To give you some thoughts around what you can do in this space, or what we've done in this space, is we've engaged with our senior management and ensured that there's sponsorship in place and understanding what the concepts are of Apqp. We've invested time in that, and then we've also ensured as part of our business plan deployment that we've had alignment to help enable this. We've got into thinking about how do we help people understand more about what this is about. So we've come out with some novel practices. We've invented simple games around Apqp. Apqp has a set of what's called elements. We have card sets which we get the teams to play, where they'll map out on a simple table where you would expect the various elements to take place. That helps people start internalizing what is expected. We've taken the opportunity of anyone who's got knowledge on elements of Apqp for them to record bite-sized learning chunks of information which people can play back. So what I'm trying to draw attention to is there's ways that you can think about in your business also that there can be novel which will help within your business, help the understanding around the leadership and what expectations there are for Apqp. Cross-functional teams. Absolutely a team sport in respects to Apqp. It is not one department that delivers what the requirements are or the deliverables. So what we spent time was considering what's a simple launch framework. You know, what's the basic steps to take any team through to get them going when they're actually working on a project which involves Apqp. What has been really helpful in respects to cross-functional working is been using RACES. If you've not heard of RACES, you can Google the terminology, you'll find out what that is. But what it's really about is very simply making it clear who's accountable and then who should be consulted, informed and responsible. And when you build that map out around the elements of Apqp, it becomes a lot clearer within your company who should be doing what. We've also built some user cases, effectively value streams, network diagrams. We just show where things link together to also help that understanding within the team. And then we've supported the team members who are operating Apqp with what we call functional coaches. So design engineering will have functional coaches. People understand more about Apqp and they can then support the actual team members as they go ahead and apply the right tools and techniques. And we've been absolutely clear in our own minds within the business is adopting the good tools that are in the RM13145 Gold Book. There's things called like timing plan, Apqp timing plan. We utilize that as a tool when planning the activities. Application matrix help you understand which bits you should be applying. Finally, just to finish up on this is think about your project management, project planning and management processes. We've reflected on that, and what we've actually done in our processes is we've aligned what's known as the Apqp events. You know, the milestones, the points in time when certain things should have been fulfilled. And what we've done there is made it clear who's responsible as a decision maker on the quality of the work that has taken place. And a tool for that is what's called Rapids. Again, Google it. You can find out more about what's meant by a rapid, but it's rapid decision making is what it's about. And it makes it really clear to people who should be the decider and then who should give some inputs, etc. And then the final bit really is what's been used for is actually visualizing what's going on using visual management, Kanban boards. There's software known as Kanbanize and stuff. And that visualization really helps in terms of understanding progress and also where challenges come up to help the team out. And really what the sort of the foundation we've been really trying to put hard in place is having clear sponsors who give the right shadow in terms of what should be taking place, champions who should be thinking about removing barriers, and then functional leads who should be thinking about developing their people, and then core team members which will be facilitating the right practices and tools. It doesn't mean that you need a one-on-one personally of these people, but they're the things that you need to think about. So moving on so I've been talking about a self-reflection in what we've been doing. I want to leave you with 6 trump cards now, which I would suggest as regardless of the size of your organization, are really good enablers to getting you on the Apqp journey. If you could click on one, please. So focusing on the first 3. Number 1, and when I've revealed the last set of cards, what I recommend you do is take a screenshot, print it off afterwards and write some notes straight away about thinking about how you can enable these in your own businesses. So number 1, your project planning and management process. Do 2 things. Number 1, look at the events in Apqp and construct a rapid for them. In other words, make it clear who is the decider on the success at each of those events. You know, you can see events as milestones. And then define what practices you want to put in place around concern management. And what I mean by that is when things aren't successful, how are you going to manage it? So if an event isn't successful, how are you going to manage that concern? The second thing to point to is it's a team sport. This cross-functional thinking is really important. I've talked about RACEs. Again, I would suggest Google the term RACE and look at each of what's known as the planning deliverables and the Apqp elements in the Gold Book and construct a RACE around them. There are menu lists for you to use, and against each one of those items, just be clear who you think is accountable and should be consulted. And that in its own right will naturally help teams and the departments work together with that clarity. People processes. You know, what's really important about Apqp is maintaining training plans and people planning processes. In other words, having the right people who are capable at the right point in time. So consider how you're developing your people in your business and how you actually resource manage projects associating to Apqp. Could you reveal the next one, please? The final 3 are: think about your leaders in your business and use this as an opportunity to develop them. I've described some enablers in terms of leadership, in terms of the process leadership. And what I would sort of categorize those, what I've mentioned already, is at these 3 headlines. You want to develop individuals who can act as champions. Effectively, they're people who are in a position who can remove barriers to success. As a project goes forwards, they can help remove the barriers. Functional leads. You want to identify people who can think about the people who are involved and develop their capabilities. They may be a coach, somebody who gives some input to them. They may be actually being able to share some of the skills they have on a group basis. And then it's worth having a core team, however big, however small, who just thinks about operating it as a process in your business and what are the right practices and tools to help you. It might be IT systems, it may be something simpler, but actually thinking about the way you operate in the business. The last two is really centric on when you're doing Apqp rather than the other ones, which are some of the enablers in getting you off the ground and being clear as you progress. Whenever you start an Apqp project, make sure up front you've got clear requirements capture. At the earliest point possible, ensure that both customers and stakeholders are agreeing with what you understand as the requirements. And then when you progress your activities, utilize some of the tools that are in the RM manual, the Gold Book 13145. There's things called the application tables, which give you a menu for the events, deliverables and elements, and they're mapped against different types of change. A method change, a works transfer, a new design, a process change, and they give you that clarity of which one of these you should be thinking about using. And then the other piece would be, we have something called the timing plan. What that does is map against time, when you should start and finish things. So those two tools together help you work out what you should be doing and when you should start and finish those. And with those coupled with the other enablers I've talked about, like Erasy, it makes it clear who's accountable. So could you move on one, please? So to sort of wrap up now, we talked about, and you're going to hear this message all the time, there are community of practice set up via LinkedIn. One of those is an Apqp one. There are others. Please join. Click on one more, please. We have those gold books. There is a volume of good practice being laid down in the gold book on Apqp and PPAP. Yes, you could open it and say, well, there's a lot of pages in there, but there's a lot of pages of goodness. And they all do follow two things. They'll follow the overall process, but they will also give you a management process in your business you can follow. So really the thing I would leave you with now as a final point is, look, in terms of community of practices, the value of them is when people raise questions and share ideas and good practices. So please join community of practices, in this case Apqp and PPAP, raise questions, share the ideas and good practices. So, and that's me. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to introduce Lisa Stomer from Audit Management, MTU Aero Engines AG. Lisa's going to speak about risk-based audit system, internal and supplier. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Becky. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Stomer. I'm part of the audit management team of MTU Aero Engines. We have two roles in relation to AS13100. On the one hand, we are part of the AESQ team and the subject matter interest groups. And on the other hand, we are also a supplier and have to implement the new requirements. So what I would like to present to you today is what we at MTU understand by a risk-based audit system and how we want to implement it. Next slide, please. So first of all, I will focus on the topic risk. So I picked out the main requirements for risk in relation to audit. For that, I will refer to the AS13100 and as well as to the reference manual on quality audit methods. This is RM 13005. After that, I want to show you how a risk-based approach can be implemented depending on the audit type. And then I will explain the MTU way to risk-based supplier audits as one part of a risk-based audit system. And finally, I will give you an insight into the current challenges and opportunities we see for future development. Next slide, please. So what does the AS13100 say about risk? Maybe an interesting fact to start with, if you search for the word risk in AS13100 and also the reference manual, you get 92 and 34 hits. If you look at the number of pages then, these have 93 and 31 pages. So on average, the term risk appears at least once on each page. I think this shows how important risk assessments are and the approach is. But how is risk defined? So the EN 9000 defines risk as the effect of uncertainty. There are several notes to it. One note says the word risk is sometimes used when there's the possibility of only negative consequences. I think this is often the fact, but nevertheless, risks can also have positive consequences by taking actions and in this way improving the systems. To add one more, the EN 9100 includes a chapter on risk-based thinking, and that states that this is essential to increase the effectiveness of the quality management system and to achieve improved results. And now, what does AS 13100 require in relation to risk for audits? I picked out the last sentence of chapter 9.2 about internal audit. And this says the frequency of audits shall be reviewed and be increased if required due to process changes, quality, performance, or risk. And for supplier civilians, the first two sentences are there. The organization shall perform supplier risk assessments, which at a minimum include evaluation of results of suppliers' internal audits, suppliers' current quality performance, and part complexity. Another sentence there is the organization shall establish and execute appropriate surveillance methods to monitor supplier systems, processes, and products based on the risk evaluations. And in addition, what does the reference manual require and recommend in relation to risk? Next slide, please. So when we look at the introduction chapter of the reference manual, this says, this guideline defines the process requirements to be used by organizations to establish a procedure to implement, manage, and perform effective and risk-based internal and supplier surveillance audit program. So what I did, I have collected the main recommendations the reference manual gives for this. This is to implement an audit program based on risk assessments. The next is to use risk prioritization tools. And then based on a risk evaluation, mitigate the risks by an appropriate response. One of the risk mitigation activities can be an audit, and to develop risk assessments that cover quality system, production process, special process, and also product conformity. So next slide, please. So, but now what do these requirements mean and how can we fulfill them? So there are mandatory requirements that have to be fulfilled, and additionally, a risk approach should be integrated. So how can that be combined? I tried to show it with this table. I would like to give an idea how to answer this question. So for the internal audit system, the AS 13100 defines 4 audit types. These are quality system audits, production process audits, special process audits, and product audits. And for these audit types, there are fixed frequencies which have to be fulfilled. You can see these in the second column. And as mentioned in the beginning, the frequency can be increased due to risk. So on the other hand, the risk approach can specify the scope of an audit. I put that in the right column here. So for QS audits, it's the area of focus, for example. For production process audits and also special process audits, it's, for example, a selection of part numbers or workstations. And also for product audits, the inspected parts can be selected based on risk. There is also a template in the reference manual that can be used for that. But to get this input for the risk-based approach, the first step is to define appropriate risk criteria. So to obtain this at MTU, we are working together with our quality engineers and also the production experts to implement the risk assessment. One note I would like to make here, I put above that the MTU's intent is a risk minimizing audit system. So the goal is not only to focus on the identified risks, but moreover to mitigate the risks through the whole audit process. So with this in mind, please go to the next slide. At MTU, we tried to use the new AS13001 requirements as an opportunity. So we started a project in summer last year called Risk Minimizing Supplier Audits. And the goal was to develop a tool that would give us an indication of the need for an audit. So until then, supplier audits were performed according to fixed frequencies, depending on the product type and the classification. So what did we do within this project? As mentioned before, we started with the definition of risk criteria. So the AS13100 gives some minimum criteria. We saw them before. These were the supplier's internal audits, the supplier's current quality performance, and also the part complexity. Another important criterion is the annual audit report of the supplier, and this gives us some information about their audit system. And to get in more detail, we defined criteria together with MTU suppliers experts. And of course, we searched for industry best practices. In the next step, then we created a supplier audit risk assessment tool. And for this purpose, we prioritized the defined risks and put a weighting system behind that. Then the tool underwent several tests and optimizations. And with the help of the tool, the risk suppliers can be identified. And in addition, the tool shows the highest rated risk for each supplier. This is used then as an input for the annual audit plan. Based on that, we can define the audit frequency, the method, the type, the scope, the focus, and also the team we need for the audit. So next slide, please. So here you can see the new process for the annual audit planning at MTU. So what we do is an annual audit risk assessment for each supplier. And this is done by the MTU's Supplier Quality and Development Department. So for that, we have developed an Excel tool called the Supplier Audit Risk Assessment Tool with 16 criteria, which are all focusing on product quality. We have different characteristics and also weightings for this criteria. And we also defined 2 knockout criteria. This means when these criteria are met, this directly results in an audit need. So the assessment result is then a recommendation for an audit method. We have defined 4 categories depending on the overall risk. So there are no audit necessary, or to do at least a supplier self-audit with a predefined MTU questionnaire, or to conduct a remote audit if useful, or an on-site audit. And in addition, you get a hint for the audit focus. We get the 3 highest rated risks out of the tool. And so the responsible person can also give a recommendation for the audit type. So for example, a special process audit is needed. For the data processing, we developed an automatic summary of all the risk assessment results. So this database serves as the basis for the annual audit plan. And this also enables a centralized and also resource optimized planning. In addition, we will involve the technical experts in a really early stage. So during the risk assessment and also during the annual audit planning. Next slide, please. I would like to end with an excerpt from the introduction part of the reference manual. So the manual states, through this approach, it is anticipated that opportunities will be found to remove redundant audits across the supply chain and hence reduce the overall audit burden whilst improving its effectiveness. So we want to reach the overall goal to reduce the audit burdens by strengthening and also using the supplier's audit system. For this, the precondition, of course, is to have a relationship of trust between both. Then I have placed here 3 objectives for future development that we have defined in MTU. So one is to strengthen the supplier's audit system, and this enables to focus on so-called risk suppliers. And then we can develop them to get out of this condition. A new element we want to bring into the audit process are ethical aspects and also soft facts. And the third, the approach is to bring an element of surprise to the audit. So standards, yes, but not the same old thing. So next slide, please. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I could give you some interesting and maybe some new aspects for the development of your audit system. And I would like to hand over to Shun Sakai, who gives you information about how to get involved in AESQ. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa-san, for introduction. Hi, I'm Jun Sakai from Aichi Corporation in Japan. Thanks for joining the AESQ Supplier Forum for America, Europe region. In this session, I would like to show you how to get involved in all the activities in AESQ. I hope all different kind of AESQ activities will support your journey for the deployment of AS13001 standard in your quality management system. So let's take a look. Next slide, please. In this chart, I illustrate overview of AESQ activities, a relation with OEM and supply chain, and the timeline for AS13100 implementation. And since AS13100 has been published in March last year, the time flies, and we have already passed the halfway point of timeline for the implementation. So it is not surprising many of you should be working on gap assessment and the requirement flow down to your QMS. But at the same time, there should be many issues or roadblocks came to the surface and may be struggling to work out. And for those areas, you can find help with involvement to AESQ activities. Joining AESQ activities should enhance your interaction with OEMs and suppliers and provide mutual benefit, working to the environment to achieve the common goal. The one way is the communication, such as e-newsletters, SNS like LinkedIn or supplier forum or webinar events. The other way is taking training course provided by SAE. And the last and the most important at this point is deployment activities. For the deployment, you can visit the community of practice. Then you can have a chance to have lessons learned and best practices shared by the subject matter experts. And all of these can be started with a quite simple step. Just click the menu in AESQ website. I'll show you how to do it in the following slide. Next slide. this is a very simple first step. Please try AESQ homepage and click Get Involved menu under the membership tab. Next slide. And when you enter the Get Involved page, you can find the different options. The first three, you can sign up to receive AESQ newsletter. Secondly, become an AESQ corporate member. Or you as an individual can join in SAE G22 Standard Writing Committee. And in addition, there is a list of community of practice in the pink dotted line, which will take you directly to each LinkedIn group. So please check on that link. And with that, I would like to put out one poll question to everyone. Next. The question is, have you already joined LinkedIn or any of the community of practice? And please answer with yes or no.
So it looks like people are answering the poll. Joan will give them a few seconds and then we'll share the results.
Okay, then maybe I can come back later.
Yeah.
Please go to the next slide. So this is a community of practice. In the top left box, you can see the number of members in each community of practice. This number is growing at this moment. And once you join the group, you can post your communication to AESQ subject matter interest group, and they will respond to you with the answer. That kind of communication will energize the activities for the whole group. So do we have the result now?
So we have the results. We had 37 people that said yes, and we had 64 that said no, and we had quite a few that did not get to answer the poll.
Okay, so yeah, many of you have yes, but also a larger number answered no. So that yes might be encouraging, but no means that showing great opportunities for all of us. Okay, please go to next slide. Okay, so different subject. To learn about the latest activities in AESQ in general, you should sign up online to receive the newsletter. Then you will receive the e-newsletter monthly. Next slide. And for the corporate membership, there are two membership levels. One is AESQ Strategy Group member that is specified in the original AESQ charter and provides support and guidance to entire AESQ activities. And the other is AESQ Active member, which is open to the organization engaged in the aero engine supply chain, who can provide the resources and representation of the senior leader or subject matter experts. Again, you can send application online. Next slide. Regarding the subject matter interest group, you can follow their activities, such as webinar, even the past ones with video recording, in the interest group page under the activities menu in AESQ homepage. And next slide. And finally, in addition to what I've presented so far, from other menu in the homepage, you will be able to find these helpful or useful information. So please try different menus in AESQ homepage. And if you have any question or feedback, please use the chat function to let us know. Next slide. And that's all I have today. And I would like to turn back to Jim Wilson-san, a Senior Manager of Supplier Quality and Development in Pratt & Whitney, Canada. Jim-san, maybe you are on mute.
Yeah, Jim, you're on mute.
Always muted, yes. Sorry, folks. We're down to the Q&A session. I've been collecting the questions. I've been answering some of the questions online. So if you haven't been looking at the chat, there's some answers there already. Some of the standard answers and whatnot. We have a number of questions that have been asked, and we have approximately 25 minutes or so to get to those. So I would invite all of the co-hosts, all of the presenters that are there today. I won't necessarily pick a specific one unless the question is very specific. So anybody that wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. Just remember that mute button like I didn't. First question, and I'm going to go sequentially here as they were posted during the day, not necessarily in any order or whatnot. I think we have enough time to get to all of them, so we're basically going to go through them that way. From Connie, what is the meaning of accurate visual inspection? She says that her company is compliant to the 700 lux, which is the AS13100 standard, but not 1000, which is what the standard calls out for accurate visual inspection. 700 for regular and 1,000 when accurate visual selection. What is the meaning of accurate visual inspection? We are compliant to the lux, but not 100. Can you please share your thoughts and knowledge? This will be probably on a OEM by OEM basis for Pratt & Whitney. Both for Pratt & Whitney and Pratt & Whitney Canada, our minimum lighting requirement in not necessarily AESQ-R1, but in lower level documents has always been 100-foot candles, which works out to 1,076 lux. So forever, our minimum requirement for visual acceptance of parts has been 1,076. So 700 is certainly not going to meet our requirements, and neither is 1,000 and 13,100. That's all I'm saying about that. Other OEMs, anybody want to comment?
Jim, this is Larry. So when I saw that question, my thought was they're trying to define, forget the requirement, whether it's 700 or 1,000. They were asking about the accurate. And the accurate to me means something that requires precision, something that's tighter tolerance, something that would need better lighting to be able to discern and discriminate. So
I don't think it's a thing. It's more of a description. You know, in order to do visual inspection accurately, you need to switch on a light to do that. Anybody else? Okay. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I guess the real answer is you better check on a customer by customer basis. Whatever's left in the customer specific requirements, like for Pratt & Whitney AESQ-R1, there may be some deviations there from 13,100 if that's what it is. From Chuck. Since AS13100 is supplemental to AS9100, are all the aero engine companies going to transition to AS9100, or will the engine companies retain their current quality system requirements, S1000 for GE, for example? After AS13100 is required to be fully implemented, will special process suppliers like us need to be compliant to 9100, 13100, and S1000? Well, this will bounce to you, Larry, probably.
yeah, I saw that question, so I've been formulating an answer here.
Well, jump in.
So let's just start this way. AS9100 is going to always be the accreditation standard. AS13100 is not a certification standard. It is still incumbent upon each OEM that pushes out 13100 to have their approval and audit rigor set up for that. So I'll also caveat that by saying this. I'm working with the AS9100 writing team on the next revision, and we have given them all of the 13100 requirements. So we're rationalizing some of those. So some of the 13100 things that are unique for us, we're going to adopt into 9100. I doubt we'll get all of them, but we will get some of them. So that's my spiel there.
Make life a little bit easier. Yeah, and again, I would say go to basically by different types of suppliers. I would go to Table 2 in AS13100, which is a QMS certification requirements, and it breaks it down there by different levels of suppliers. So special process suppliers, for example, I believe it's NADCAP or equivalent, I think something like that. So look in there, figure out which type of supplier you are, and then that would tell you exactly what the requirements of 13,100 are going to be. Elaine, COVID has caused a significant impact on our business ability, of course, to meet the required date that we are to have this implemented. Is there consideration being given to delaying the required date? Does anybody want to give her the bad news, or should I go ahead? No, Elaine. You know, AS 13100 was published last March. We've started these communications, all sorts of different communications with suppliers, either at the AESQ level or at the individual company level. And the point is, look, we've had enough time to get this out to you. You've had over 20 months to get it implemented. We really, at least I'll speak for Pratt, we really won't be looking to give any sort of extensions to companies on being certified. So we said it earlier in the presentation, if you haven't started your RM 13009 self-assessment, if you haven't completed it, you are way behind and need to start assigning the appropriate people to get that done so that you're not running around November, December trying to get it certified. Anybody else want to jump in?
I think you said it well, Jim.
Yeah. All right. For Brad, we offer testing inspection services only, such as NDT. We do not manufacture any materials or products. We hold NADCAP and ISO 17025 only, not AS9100 or ISO 9001 for manufacturers. Is there anything in AS 13100 that would apply to the services we provide? Brad, I think the simple answer is go to table 2 in 13100. It's very clear there that the requirements for special process is NADCAP or customer's requirement. And for if you're an external calibration or lab, materials lab, it's ISO 17025 or equivalent. So you may have been covered on both ends there, depending on, you know, technically which type of supplier you are. But certainly NADCAP for special process suppliers is what 13100 calls out for.
Yeah, Jim, I would piggyback that. I've seen a couple of questions recently come through through Becky that's asking. I do both. I'm a calibration lab and certified to the 17025. I'm also a special process. So in that case, you obviously would have to maintain both accreditations.
All right. From, sorry, B. Borowitz. Does GE, again, another GE specific question. What are you doing? What are you doing? Will GE intend to drop S1? And maybe you can explain what S1 is. Will an AS 13100 certification negate the need for an AS 9100 certification? And third part, will the IAQG database and its mission to reduce the desire for audits become obsolete? Wow. Let's deal with the first one, Howard.
There's a lot packed in there.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a bucket.
S1 is short for S1000. So when we perform an S1 audit, that's auditing to make sure a supplier can meet our S1000 requirements. And no, that is not being replaced by AS9100. As I articulated earlier, there is separate and distinct AS9100 requirements. And even today, without AS13100, you still have to have an AS9100 accreditation as a entry level, if you will, and then you've got to have a GE specific S1 audit. That will not change. The S1 will just incorporate all of the goodness from AS13100 when we do our individual OEM audits. And no, there is not a certification, and no, there's not intended to be a certification at this point for 13100.
Yeah, the next number of questions are all on certification, and let's get that answer out there. It's like there are no plans to certify AS 13100. We've been approached by certification bodies, the ones that do AS 9100 certification, saying, "Hey, you know, how do we do this?" It's like, well, no, there are no plans to have certification. You heard Lisa earlier talking.
I will say this, Jim, in an effort to reduce the potential number of customer-specific audits and visits, we do have built into the recipe that sources are required to do this annual assessment. And if they do the annual assessment, your customers may be able to accept that as evidence that you've got compliance. So just remember that.
Lisa talked to you about the annual audit report. You can go back to her slides later on, but Lisa talked about the annual audit report. That was the best way we as the members were able to come up with an idea that if one of us goes in and does an AS 13100 audit, and I can't accept a GE audit, obviously, but I don't want to go in and do the same audit. So if GE does come in and do an audit in your annual audit report at a very high level, not describing who did the audit, but an AS 13100 audit was done using this standard checklist, and here are the findings, and here were the corrective actions. That will be part of your annual audit report. And if I request it, you will send that to me at the beginning of the year, and I will take a look at that and go, well, you know what? it looks like there was a good audit done and it was, you know, thorough in that, maybe I don't need to go on site and do a second 13,100 audit. Obviously, you know, we are working together in the AESQ, but we are still individual customers with individual needs. And this is the best way and the only way we could come up with an idea that allows you to, if you put a little bit of work in that annual audit report, maybe some of your audit days that you waste audit, you know, in entertaining us to do audits will be reduced because you will be able to demonstrate to us not only your AS13001 audits, your internal audits that were done, your CB audits that were done, your regulatory audits that were done, all of the audit activity in a package at a very high level describing what they are, but not giving any details, would be enough for us to say, okay, well, look, your quality is good, your on-time delivery is good, and here, look at all this activity last year. You know what? I'm not going to go on site for 4 days. I'm going to send you a mail-in audit, or I'm going to postpone it altogether and take a look at it next year. So that's how that works. And Lisa did a very good job explaining that. But that's our hope, is that that will allow us to use risk-based assessments of our suppliers and not have to duplicate the kind of audits you're getting today, because I'm only doing an ASQR01 audit, and GE's only doing S1000 audits, and Rolls-Royce is only do Sabre audits, and it's basically the same audit, as we know from having looked at those documents in great detail doing AS13100.
Hey, Jim, I'd like to just comment too on a lot of the questions. It seems like there is a confusion around the hierarchy of these specifications and kind of what comes first and what comes second. And if later, these slides are available as well as the presentation on our AESQ website. If you go in and look at some kind of the flow down, AS9100 is a requirement to be an aerospace supplier. And that is not going away. What we have been working on to consolidate, simplify, standardize is all of our individual requirements across each of our companies, like S1000, SAFE, Sabre, et cetera. That is what we have been working on. As much as we can, as Larry said, incorporate any of that back up into 9100 so we can continue to reduce our own propulsion supply-based requirements. We're going to continue to try and do that. But AS9100 is first. It's a basic requirement. Of course, I'm talking about, depending on your type of supplier. And then from there, it's our own individual business requirements that we've been trying to consolidate and simplify.
And we've done quite a bit. Don't get us wrong, but there's still some leftovers. All right. There was a third part of that question, which was, will the IAQG database and its mission to reduce the desire for audits become obsolete? No, absolutely not. I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the near future. In fact, it may even be expanded somewhere down the line, let's say. Tony, a couple of questions on training here from Tony in his cell. If for AS9100, we had to have trained auditors. Is AESQ going to have training for this? And there was a couple of questions. Will the AESQ have a training class for auditing of this spec? Internal audits is our responsibility, but who is training the outside auditors, and can we have the same training? So I think what Tony's getting to is we as the customers will be coming in to do 13,100 audits at some point until, for the next couple of years, until everything is rolling really well. Who is training the audits from our various customers? Anybody want to jump in there? I mean, I don't know that we have a specific answer for the AESQ. Maybe we can talk about what we're thinking at our individual companies.
This question comes up quite frequently, and there's some FAQs out there answering the question, but we'll field it again today since it seems to be a matter of confusion. So first, let me say that AESQ is not going to provide training for internal audits. We are not going to train internal auditors, but there's a wealth of auditors out there, and there's a wealth of training resources out there. Will they be consistent? Probably not. So a supplier, if they're looking for someone to approve their lead auditors per se, they will need to make sure somebody is versed in 13100 and somebody's versed in your quality system. Because that's what you want an internal auditor to be able to do, is assess your organization's ability to meet your customers' requirements.
I think this would be a good time just also to mention that So, you know, we said that you are not going to have to officially certify like you do AS9100 with a third-party auditor for the 13,001, or for AS9100 for the 13,100. But we have developed training that's available through SAE on the 13,100 requirements, and it's called the 13,100 requirements course. And that is what you need. That's what you need to be able to you know, understand what it's all about, assess yourself to it, et cetera, and get your company fluent on, you know, the requirements behind the specification. So I would take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's a great plug. I mean, you know, it's absolutely essential that it's a requirement, in addition to being essential, that someone in your organization responsible for the deployment of the standard goes through the requirements course to understand the requirements well enough to be able to dictate that through your quality system.
Let me add that at Pratt & Whitney, at least, we have discussed in our planning that whatever is left over in AESQ R01, which will be greatly reduced from the current, but whatever is left over there, we're also going to provide to suppliers a self-audit checklist for that as well. So not only do you have the RM 13009 self-assessment for the 13,100 requirements, but we would be giving you an AESQ R01 self-assessment. So that would help out hopefully with your internal auditing as well. And we'll be able to put in there, you know, guidance for each question, what are we looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So that should probably help as well. All right, moving along, I have 5 or 6 questions left. David had a similar question. Are OEMs going to have other required, okay, no, it's slightly separate. David asks, are the OEMs going to have other required training that will be issued by them, not the AESQ for us as suppliers? Pratt & Whitney, no, I don't believe there's anything. No additional training. I mean, besides the AS 13001 DPRV training, which we're all still keeping separate from AS 13100, and your TQRs, your TPRVs have to go through that training. No, I don't think there's any other training that I've heard discussed on top of 13,100, the 2 levels of training required for 13,100. Anybody, any other OEMs see any training in addition to that?
Maybe something to think about on that is if you go into a number of the gold books, you will see there's a training syllabus in them. The RM 13004 has it, the Apqp manual. So there's 2 things to pick up on that I would suggest. If there's training providers out there, if you align your training to that syllabus, then you're supporting the enabling of that type of training. And that's perhaps something also to pick up on, but are we mandating that? We haven't been mandating it, but there is that syllabus highlighted in a number of the gold books, you know, as a baseline for what would help people on their journeys for the different subjects.
But I would also add that, you know, we will only speak for Pratt & Whitney. We don't think we're going to require any training, but we will providing informational services. We will be providing webcasts that go through the new AESQ R01 in great detail, clause by clause kind of thing. So is that training? Yes or no? But I mean, that will be informational, not a required training, but it will certainly, there'll be opportunities both through webcasts and through our various supplier portals to gather information on specifically what's required for us. And I'm assuming the other OEMs would be doing something similar as well. All right. Anybody else have anything? Our PPAP guys, it's an interesting one from John. He says Ford Motor Company announced they would no longer accept PPAP submissions authored in spreadsheets. Do you see the same happening in the aerospace sector? I don't know if that's relevant or not, but it was an interesting.
I guess the way to make the link is Ford is one of you know, Ford, Chrysler, etc. GM came together, put the blue books together, and have been driving their standards. I think that's might be something about one of the companies is changing the policy on information evidence-wise around PPAP submissions. I think generally as a community, we've always sort of said that there's certain standards we have in place. You know, if you look at some of the gold books, there's templates in there in place, but we've sort of not said that we're, I don't believe, not accepting information in a particular format. We'll make it clear in what format, and naturally as companies we will have different IT systems in this new digital world which will help that. So it's kind of a difficult one to answer, apart from really talk to your customers just to get that clarity, I would say.
That's definitely one of those things that remains in each one of our company-specific requirements. Probably, how would you submit PPAP, and what are some very specific things for us that we need in a PPAP that maybe the other OEMs don't. But yeah, that's going to be on a customer by customer basis, I'm sure. If we could backtrack just a little bit, Denise just posted something based on her question about additional training from the OEMs. She says Rolls-Royce has mandated say before training at a cost. You know, Carl, any idea?
I'm not sure about that.
All right,
So
we'll look into it
say
then, Denise.
So I'm not 100% clear on that, so I'll be wrong trying to answer that.
No, that's good. So Denise, what we'll
sure
do is we'll take your question, or we'll take your comment, and we will post it on the worst case. We'll post on the FAQs. If we have your details, we can send you back in the response right away. But that's something we can look into. Okay, we park those when we have to. All right. Actually, another one for Carl. What is the difference between this is from Amy? What is the difference between AS 13100 compliance self-assessment, the RM 13009 assessment, and Apqp maturity assessment?
I would guess what so I'm not an expert on the AS 13100 compliance assessment, but that's driving. It's in the title. It's driving compliance. Maturity assessments. There's an original one which AS 9145 had. I know as Rolls-Royce as a company has made some adaptations to that. The point of the maturity assessment is a bit in the title as well. It's helping companies understand how they're maturing on their journey. So it will question things like leadership, how engaged and how understanding are they of what's expected. You know, not at all to fabulous, excellent. And then when you get that gap analysis, you can put a plan to move that forwards. How do you move leadership into a space where they're excellent, well-informed? So I would try and answer it that way, but I'm not an expert on the compliance assessment. And
so Jim, let me add this. So this question came up recently in an internal discussion here at GE. So it appears to be a little confusing. I'm not sure why, but let me try to unravel it. AS 13009 is a gap assessment for AS 13100 and all of the stated requirements to that standard. The maturity assessment is narrowly aligned with Apqp and the maturity of your organization to meet the requirements of 9145. Two separate and distinct tasks and activities. One is assessing your preparation and readiness to meet 13100. The other is looking to see where you are in terms of meeting Apqp.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. Let's try to get through. There's 3 or 4 left. Lisa, are you still on? Dan has a question about what are the 16 risk criteria you have defined?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, thanks, Dan, for your question. I tried to give you an overview. We look at the last supplier audits we did there. So the results we had in the last audits. Then also, as Jim said, we look at the annual audit report to get the information, then the internal audit system from the supplier. But then also that we look at concessions, inspection reports, escapes, also maybe customer complaints. We have part complexity, sub-tier control is one important part. Then the experience of the supplier. Are there any changes maybe in the organization which can affect the product quality? Are there changes in delivery quantities maybe? Then one part is compliance to AS 13100. And then we have also the soft fact, how is the trust level for the business relationship? Yeah, that's it to sum up. I hope that gives you an answer.
Yeah, a couple more questions. I'll take this one quickly. Curtis asks, I would like you to address the cost to small build-to-print suppliers with limited resources. Curtis, you know, this is a wide open subject that we could discuss for days, but let me give you the reality that we found at Pratt & Whitney, and it was in a slide earlier today. Today, ASQR Rev 11 calls out all of the existing AS 13,000 standards. You add up all of the pages of requirements that you have and all of those standards plus ASQR 1 Rev 11, it's 174 pages of requirements you today and for the last 3 years have been contractually required to be compliant to. In the new scheme of things, and with an estimated size for the new Rev 12 that's coming out and the 93 pages in AS 13,100, that drops to 102 pages. So you as a supplier today are responsible for 174 pages of requirements. It's going to drop to 102. So the argument that it's a lot more work to do AS 13,100 really just doesn't fly based on the data that we have. And I'll leave it there. Like I said, this is something that can be discussed and discussed and discussed. But when we start looking at it, it really does drop the amount of work. The number of shalls drops. You saw the slide said 23%, but it's actually going to be a lot more than 23% in some cases. So the number of hard requirements you have. And then, by the way, we give you 12 giant reference manual gold books to give you basically access to consultants on each one of those very specific subjects that allow you to do the job a little bit easier than normal. I believe Larry would like to chime in.
I just wanted to make the statement that, you know, part of our charter with publishing the 13100 was we wanted to raise the bar on quality. In order to raise the bar, we necessarily needed to add more strength and rigor with some of the requirements. So yes, I can appreciate the question. I can empathize with your position, but at the end of the day, everyone in the aerospace industry, everybody in the AESQ supply chain must meet the requirements because we see these as real risks that need to get mitigated.
Okay, I don't have time for one last question, but one quick question from Ed. Are there sanctioned training sessions for the quality tools themselves, Apqp, PPAP, PFMEA, control plans? Becky, maybe, do we still have links on the AESQ website for approved trainers in some of these things?
AESQ is not currently approving training providers. So on the website, we have the list of training courses available right now.
All right. So I guess the answer, Ed, is no, there's not. These are all available throughout the industry, and we are okay with any of the consultants you can find out there probably. But no, there's nothing specific right now. All right. That's it, I guess. You know, sorry if we didn't get to a couple of smaller questions. I'll pass it to Barbara for our closure.
See, make sure I'm off mute here. Great. So it has been, to me, a very interesting couple of hours. Hopefully everyone has a better understanding of the fact that AS 13,100 is different and much, you know, includes more than just Apqp. I think a lot of times we lock them together, AS 13,100 Apqp. It does include those requirements, but it is more than that. So as you could hear from Safran, IHI, MTU, which is a great job, by the way, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls, GE in the past, is we're all holding ourselves accountable as member companies, just as we are holding the supply base accountable. This is definitely a journey, as you could hear, for all of us, and it takes work. It takes a lot of work. So you could ask, why are we putting ourselves through this dramatic change to the industry? Why are we setting that bar higher? And as Larry just mentioned, and I think the answer to that is that we have to. We have to make ourselves better. We have too many escapes. We have too many disruptions. Whether it affects delivery, it affects quality, it affects yield, or even safety. There's just too many. Our customers demand us to be better, and so do the flying public. They expect perfection, and that's what we must deliver to them. I hope you were able to get some good ideas on how and where to start from all of the different examples. My challenge to all of you is that we just have to begin. How do we begin? We begin by reading the spec and completing the AS 13009 gap assessment. For your business, I think what's important to think about is that you can't successfully execute on a plan that doesn't exist. So if you're driving from one city to another, you need to map out your route. And you can't expect your teams to arrive at a destination without giving them clear direction. So as quality managers, and you know, I hold myself accountable to this as well, because GE has our own changes that we need to make as we implement 13,100 internally. If we do not give clear plans and expectations to our teams, we can't expect them to get there. And that is on us. So please, that is my challenge to you. Really start digging in. You may be behind, you may be ahead, but it's not too late to start. So thank you all for your time today. This the session will be available, the slides and the content, the video on the AESQ website, and we appreciate your engagement. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.